Hello and welcome back. In this video we're going to cover, with all the 2025 testing overhauls for the ACT, what changes specifically were made to the science section. Then, once we finish that, we're going to go to how to use all the old practice materials, the old practice tests, old study guides from before these changes, and apply them to the new timing and new changes, so that way you can still use all that old stuff, which is what most people have access to right now. As always, if you find it helpful, leave a like, subscribe, comment with any questions you might have or anything you might like to see more of. So before we get started, I do want to point out that this video is only going to cover the changes to the science section. If you want to see all of the changes for the test, I have a separate video. Here's the name of it. I'll put it in a link down in the description. That's going to be in my general study guides and information playlist. So the content of this video, or any of the section specific ones, aren't going to have anything new that wasn't covered in this total video that has the entire list of changes. So if you've already seen this, you don't need to worry about these section specific ones unless you just want to recap. These are just for those that prefer to break it up or that only go to specific playlists. I wanted to make sure that they each had a video here so everyone knows these changes happened and know what they are. So now to our intro here. The most important note here is that the content being tested is not changing, but what does change is the presentation and the timing. And in the case of science, the big one, spoiler alert, the science is now optional. So I am going to go through and I'll be updating all the content and strategy videos as necessary. I'm going to see if I can try and get these all updated by the September test. We'll see if I can do that. It's a lot of videos, but that's my goal. You can also go to the ACT's website. They have an ACT test enhancement page. You can just Google that. That'll have the most up-to-date information straight from the source, and it'll have practice problems in the new format, so I definitely recommend you check that out. So when did all these changes happen, or will they happen? For anyone taking the computer-based testing in the US, that's what I mean by national, this already happened in April. But for everyone else, so those taking the paper-based testing in the US, or for any of the international students, this will take place first in September. So that's the next test. Now there's also the state and district spring testing in the US here. That's the testing that's generally in the February, only in the spring, where your school actually gives you the test during school hours during the week. So that's only done in spring, so the first one that'll be here with the new version is going to be spring of next year, 2026. Now I do want to point out one of these changes is that you have extra flexibility just for this state and district testing. So it used to be when you take it, you have to do all of the sections and everything you want all at once. Now, with science being optional and writing being optional, they're giving schools the option to make you just take English, math, and reading all at once, and then you can take science and or writing on different days, and they'll submit your tests all at the end of the testing period. It's up to your school if they're going to do that. It's also up to them if they're going to give you paper or online tests. It's also up to them if they're going to require science or require writing. So definitely talk with your school, figure out how they plan to conduct their tests so you can study accordingly. So what are these science changes? So unlike the other videos where I start with how long it is, the most important thing here is that science is now optional. And it's not going to be used anymore to calculate your composite or your super score. So now your composite score is just going to be your average of your English, your math, and your reading. Science will have its own separate score, just like writing has its own separate score. Now, I would still recommend taking the science section for anyone potentially interested in a STEM field. That's science, technology, engineering, and math. Because these programs are going to care most about the math and the science. So this definitely is going to give you a chance to stand out, and a lot of these programs might actually require it. For anyone else, I would say do your research. Colleges are going to take a little bit to figure out how they want to do this. So generally, if you can't figure this out, you can't find it by talking with their admissions or finding on their website. You can always talk with your guidance counselor. They might know or have some good connections. But if you really don't have any idea, generally I would say if you can do well on the science section from all your practice, then you can take it, and at worst it just gives you a chance to stand out. But if you really are not interested at all in any of the science or math-based programs, and you just cannot do well on the science test, you might be better off skipping it. Now for the test provided by your high school, as I mentioned on the previous slide, your school might still require you to take it. So figure that one out, because if they do, you're going to want to be ready for it. And if you do take the science section, you're not going to be able to choose to send only the other scores. So let's say you take the science, which is optional, and decide, hey, I did really poorly on that science. I just want to send college my English, my math, and my reading. Most likely you can't do that. It's probably going to work just like the writing section always has, which has always been optional, which is if you choose to take any part of a test, then you send that entire test. And that's fine if you're super scoring, if you do better on the other sections or between different tests, but you can't choose to just hide the optional tests. So I did want to make sure you're aware of that. So what are the changes if you do choose to take it? Well, we're now going to have 40 minutes with 40 questions instead of the old 35 minutes for 40 questions. So they just give you an extra 5 minutes here. Of these questions, 6 of them are going to be experimental questions. So they used to have an extra section after science, which was just an experimental, which never counted towards your score. They got rid of that to make the entire test shorter, but instead they sprinkled in a few random experimental questions into every section. So these are ones that will not count towards your score. You're not going to know which ones they are. They're not going to be marked, and they're going to be random. So the main takeaway from that is don't spend a lot of time on any one problem, because there might be a chance that won't even count and you just wasted all that time for nothing. The good news is if you miss something, you might get lucky and it be one that just didn't count. So you're also now going to have 7 passages instead of 6, at least according to their practice tests. Again, these things are always subject to change slightly. And each of those is going to have 5 to 6 questions each. So it's not going to be the exact same number of questions for every passage. One of those is still going to be a text-based passage. Those are ones that don't have graphs typically. Instead, you're going to have several different students or several different teachers or several different scientists, each giving their own theory or explanation for something. Some of them are wrong, some are right. That doesn't matter. The questions are going to be focused more on comparing and contrasting. Now, the number of questions requiring actual scientific background knowledge is also increasing. It's still not going to be a lot. It's mostly going to be about just reading graphs. But there will be a few more of those where you just have to actually know something about science. Pacing-wise now, you're going to have 1 minute per question. That's pretty easy math to do. So just count the number of questions in a passage and aim for that many minutes on the passage. Because again, the passage length will change. So I can't just give a per passage time. And keep in mind it gets harder as you go. So if you can, try to go faster earlier on so you have more time later. So now let's get to studying with the old materials. Because yeah, they're still useful and that's what most people have right now. So key points, like I said, it's still useful because the concepts being tested are exactly the same. So anything teaching you how to do it or what material is on there is still just as valid because the test for science is hardly changing. You just have a little bit more time. So really all you have to do is account for any of the pacing changes. So you have 2 choices. You can use the original timing on the old tests if you want, because the new one just gives you 5 more minutes. So if you can do it with 5 fewer minutes, then you're definitely good to go. Your other option is use the new timing per question to determine how much you would have had for the old number and then apply that. And that's really easy to do since the number of questions didn't actually change for this one, but I'll cover that on the next slide. So quick recap. Old version of the science section, we had 40 questions and we had 35 minutes to do them. That was 52.5 seconds per question. You had 6 passages, so about 5 to 6 minutes per passage. Now we have 40 questions in 40 minutes, so a full minute per question. So if we want to use an old test, just give yourself 40 minutes for the section overall instead of 35. To time per passage, just give 1 minute for each question in the passage. And that'll do well for you to practice with the new timing. That's going to do it for this video. Hope you found it helpful. Good luck, and I'll see you on the next one.